Hi everybody, it's Librarian Faith from the Mandel Public Library of West Palm Beach. And today I'm going to show you how to create an enclosed terrarium out of a mason jar. Isn't that adorable? Let's get started. In order to make a mason jar terrarium, you're going to need a couple of things. Firstly, you'll need a mason jar. I'm using a 25-ounce one and I would recommend this size or larger. Some soil. You're going to want to add in some additional fertilizer or some sort of organic material. Compost would be fantastic. And add that in every 2 or 3 months. Just because the terrarium has such a small amount of soil in it, it'll need some additional supplements in order to maintain a happy, healthy plant. You'll also need some sand. This acts as a filtration. And some sort of rocks or pebbles to put on the bottom. Because this is Florida, I'm using some seashells and some sea blue glass pebbles, which I think will look quite nice together. Last but not least, you'll need a plant. Because this is an enclosed terrarium with the lid, as opposed to an open one, which would have increased airflow, I'm using a fern. Ferns love low light, which is more common to the closed terrarium, and higher humidity levels, which is very much a part of having a closed terrarium. You may see I'm using just one tiny plant for this project. That's because you don't want the plant to touch the sides of the terrarium when you first plant it, and you want to have room for it to grow. So this will allow plenty of room over time. The first thing you'll want to do with your terrarium is put in the drainage base. Now this can be any sort of rock or pebble. You just want to have big pieces of something to break up the soil and allow water to drain down to the bottom. You don't want it to be just soil, because then the roots will eventually grow down to the bottom of that soil. And if you ever water it just a smidge too much, water will pool at the bottom and cause root rot, which will eventually kill your plant. So to start out with, I'm going to put some glass pebbles at the bottom. One thing to note, you want the entire base, the drainage level, the filtration level, and then the soil to take up no more than about 1/3 of your container. You don't want it to go up too high because then there won't be enough room for the plant. That looks about good. Next, we'll add in the sand. This is the stuff I'm using. You want it to cover the top. Don't want too thick of a layer. That looks about right. And the last bit is soil. Now, if you'd prefer, you can also add a layer of charcoal at this point. Charcoal acts as an additional filter, which helps remove some of the gases and, frankly, bad smells that can accompany any plant decay. I'm not using it because it's not 100% necessary, but it does help, especially if we're using a bigger terrarium, and it does help even more for closed terrariums. However, you would have to replace that charcoal every 6 months to a year, depending on the type of charcoal you use. One tip, if you do put charcoal in, do not use a type of charcoal that you would use for grilling. A lot of times those type of charcoals, and especially charcoal briquettes, will have additives to them that will hurt the plant. Tar or some sort of fire accelerant. It's not good for ferns. So then we'll add in some soil, and we want the soil to be the thickest layer. Now, if you want to include cacti into your terrarium, that is wonderful. Cacti do very well, but you'll want to use a cacti and succulent specific soil. You can find that at about any garden center. And you want your guys to be happy. You can see I'm picking out some of the larger mulchy pieces in this soil. Since it's such a small amount of soil to begin with, I don't want to add too much non-soil stuff. I'm going to make a little hole right in the center because that's where we're going to be putting our plant. So as you can see, it's about maybe a little bit closer to 1/2, but my goal was to reach about 1/3, which I'm happy with. So Now that we have the soil in place, I'm going to go ahead and put in our fern. Isn't he a cutie pie? I chose a fern because ferns love low light and high humidity, which is what an enclosed terrarium will give it. And I'm also using such a tiny fern because, once again, this is a smaller terrarium. We don't want to jam pack it full of plants, otherwise they'll compete with each other and eventually smother each other. To remove the plant, you'll want to hold it by its base gently, flip it over, and squeeze the sides of the pot. Now that we have the plant free, I'm going to make sure the roots are free, which they are. Now that we have our layers set, and I'm making a little hole in the middle, and I've already unbound my fern. I'm going to gently lower it in to that middle section and add some soil on top. I'm just going to have to kind of dump it in on top because, as you can see with terrariums, they're a little fiddly when it comes to maneuverability. I'm just going to go around the edge and tap it in. And there we go, that looks about good. I'm going to add a couple of final touches, some decorations. I'm going to add a seashell to this back part. It's a little mini conch. Add another one here. And the last one, boop, off to the side. Let's give it a little bit of personality. And last but not least, we're going to want to spritz it down with some water. You're going to want to give it a good misting about once a week. Maybe a little less. There we go. Maybe a little less since this is an enclosed terrarium and it'll start to produce its own moisture naturally. And now we're going to seal it up. And we have our contained little wonderland. Isn't it adorable? I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Be sure to tune in next week for another one. And until then, happy reading!